responses to the questions raised as they relate to policing and to the board. Over the last week, there's been a number of operations put in place to support parades and protests. Of course, we are now in the run-up to the 12th and the height of the parading season, and concerns around bonfires have been the focus of some attention, and criticisms of the PSNI for not doing more have been founded as well. We are, of course, disappointed that despite the best efforts of the Reverend Good and Jim Roddy, a resolution could not be found to the impasse at Twadell. But we are hopeful that the goodwill of the negotiations can lead to an agreement soon. As a board, it is our sincere hope that all those with influence will continue in their efforts to make sure that the time ahead is peaceful and that it will pass without incident. We certainly hope that the resolutions can be found and that good sense prevails by all those involved. And we have some questions today, Chief Constable, around operational plans for the next few days. Support for the Euro from PSNI. Over the last number of weeks, the public image of Northern Ireland has been very positively in the national and international spotlight, following the impeccable example of the fans at the Euros, and indeed the PSNI officers who were up there in support of that. And finally, your report, Chief Constable, highlights some of the awards received by officers over the last period. We would like to offer our congratulations to all of those, and in particular, because she's here today, we'd like to congratulate Chief Superintendent Barbara Ray on being awarded the Queen's Police Medal. So over to you now, Chief Constable.
Thank you, Chair. You see, this is quite a significant time for policing and for society generally, as we sit on the cusp of an opportunity to reform public sector service delivery through the new programme for government, which will hopefully focus on an outcomes-based approach. I can assure you that policing will play its full part in this transformative process. Policing will work to support the emerging programme for government outcomes and recommendations that have been made as a result of both programme for government and other government commissioned reports or reviews. And there may be some questions about that later. But the programme for government consultation, the Fresh Start panel report on disbandment of paramilitary groups, the cross-jurisdictional paramilitary action plan, the organised crime task force, and the Northern Ireland related terrorism strategy have a number of overlapping action points and overlapping recommendations. So to effectively coordinate the policing response to these, I have appointed Barbara Gray, who's sitting to my left here, and another colleague, Chief Inspector Catherine McGee, to liaise across the organisation, to reach across the organisation to the various departments and branches to ensure a coordinated approach. And of course, you as a board will be updated on this work as it progresses, and of course you will need to be working together on some of this, because some of the recommendations are jointly owned by both the police service and the policing board. Since the last board meeting, significant quantities of explosives have been seized both here in Belfast and in Dublin. This is good news in one sense and a worrying indicator in another. On Monday the 21st of June, 1.5 kilograms of suspected commercial explosives were recovered in the New Lodge area of North Belfast. Investigations are ongoing and a number of lines of inquiry are being followed. What that seizure demonstrates is that when people in communities provide us with information, we act upon it, and we act in partnership with communities to keep people safe. Our colleagues in Garda Síochána have also been tackling harm. On the 16th of June, a 52-year-old man was arrested as part of an operation targeting violent dissident Republicans. This individual was charged with knowingly possessing an explosive substance. That was 4 400-gram blocks of commercial explosives and 3 electric explosive detonators. Last Wednesday, 29th of June, the Organised Crime Task Force annual report was launched for 2016, and there are a number of achievements worthy of mention. Over £11 million worth of drugs were seized over the 12-month period. 59 potential victims of human trafficking were rescued, and substantial reductions in fuel laundering were also achieved. Cash in transit robberies and tiger kidnaps have virtually been eliminated. These successes are a result of effective cooperation between community, private and voluntary sectors working with police and law enforcement. Collectively, we are reducing harm in our community and keeping children, parents, grandchildren safe from extreme violence and harm. The report also indicated a growth in cybercrime, with 64 cyber incidents reported to the PSNI Cybercrime Centre and 22 operations undertaken in relation to network intrusion, cyber blackmail, darknet activity and malware attacks. Associated losses and damage incurred by businesses and individuals in these areas run into tens of millions of pounds. To meet the challenges in this aspect of policing, a new purpose-built cybercrime centre will be completed shortly, and additional staff have been recruited and more will follow to increase our specialist investigative capacity in this regard. At a business level, we're continuing to work with key stakeholders to highlight the ongoing and emerging risks. On that note of business crime, on the 21st of June, in partnership with the Department of Justice and yourselves here at the board, the Business Crime Action Plan was launched. Businesses are at the heart of prosperous communities, and work is ongoing to implement the recommendations, which includes scoping the need for a Northern Ireland-wide cyber strategy. Within our community, Chair, vulnerability comes in many forms. And to support the safeguarding of people who are vulnerable, we have, as you know, created the Public Protection Branch, which aims to prevent and detect domestic abuse, sexual and physical abuse of children and vulnerable people, and to contribute to the investigation of missing people who are vulnerable to physical and or sexual abuse or exploitation. Police have been working with partners to create a framework to safeguard those individuals who are at the high end of medium risk. The Concern Hub, which is facilitated by the Police and Community Safety Partnership, with input from the Department of Health, Social Services and Public Safety, the Western Health and Social Care Trust, the Department of Justice, probation, in the form of the Probation Service and the Youth Justice Agency, and the Department of Education, and that is all now operational in Derry City and Strabane. Based on information sharing, individuals at risk are identified and resources allocated from the relevant agency or body to deliver the best outcomes for that person to tackle their vulnerability. By focusing service delivery on earlier intervention, the aim is to achieve more effective outcomes for the individual, as opposed to focus being on organisational or departmental performance indicators. We want to tackle vulnerability and keep people safe. And on that note as well, within the policing plan, one of the outcomes relates to specifically reducing offending and or the seriousness of offending of the top 100 priority offenders in Northern Ireland. So in March 2013, the Department of Justice, the Probation Board and the Police Service and the Youth Justice Agency launched the Reoffending in Partnership Initiative, or ROP, to deal with the most prolific offenders. 11 reducing offending units staffed by just over 70 police officers and 30 youth diversion officers now manage 516 individuals. 297 of these are priority offenders. 150 are young people identified as being at risk of offending but haven't actually got there yet, with the remaining 69 people being at risk of significant harm. Actions taken in relation to these priority offenders are reviewed by all of the agencies on a monthly basis. In 2014, an economic evaluation of the initiative was commissioned and carried out by Department of Justice economist. It established that there was a 29% reduction in crime by those offenders within the programme, and a reduction in crime and seriousness of crime of those selected for the programme. A further economic evaluation has just commenced in June 2016. The Reducing Offending and Partnerships have highlighted the realisation of the programme for government's outcome-based approach to service delivery. However, for more extensive collaborative working practices, the starting point must remain on information sharing. You mentioned the Police College and the difficulties that we've had there in recent weeks, Chair, in your opening remarks. I have previously briefed members of the Policing Board on the allegations of impropriety by some student officers within the Police College, which resulted in disciplinary consequences for those concerned. All those involved received written warnings under the student officer misconduct procedures and a clear explanation of the standards expected from an Assistant Chief Constable regarding the need for unquestionable integrity and high ethical standards for those who aspire to hold the office of Constable. The 54 student officers who were unable to show that they achieved the required academic standard on their own merits have been required to undertake the 22-week training programme in its entirety once again, and that training started on Monday past, on the 4th of July. A review of processes at the Police College is ongoing, and updates will be provided to the Board in due course, and I understand that you may well have some questions around that in the time that follows. There are ongoing efforts to enhance the criminal justice experience for victims of crime, and one of those efforts was recognised last month as the ARDS Indictable Case Pilot. That was a partnership between the Police Service, the Public Prosecution Service and the Court Service for Northern Ireland, when we collectively won an Innovation Award at the Northern Ireland Civil Service Awards. The Indictable Case Pilot has been pioneering in terms of speeding up justice, and it's actually referenced in the Fresh Start Agreement as good practice. Principles from the pilot have been adopted by the Serious Crime Unit, and feedback from victims' families is that they have found the progressive pace of investigation and prosecution very helpful. As we look forward, Chair, we're in the final stage of the voluntary exit scheme process. In fact, we've completed it, and 252 people have now accepted offers to leave the organisation. Now that it is clear where staff resourcing will be impacted, this can be factored into the workforce planning activity to inform ongoing processes such as priority-based resourcing. More than 70 presentations outlining suggested changes to systems and processes have already been brought before myself and the Deputy Chief Constable in the first wave of priority-based resourcing panels, where we scrutinise in detail the functionality across the organisation to ensure value for money and efficiency. While a significant number of parades, and you've mentioned some of them, White Rock, Tour of the North, the various Somme commemoration parades, have taken place so far without any serious incident. We're grateful for that, but it is clear that dialogue is critical in the management of any event that involves the gathering of large volumes of people. I'm encouraged by the level of positive dialogue that is currently taking place in our communities, and it does create, I don't want to speak too soon as we look into the 12th of July next week, but I think it does create a more optimistic outlook for the rest of the parading season, although we did of course have public disorder in Carrickfergus last Friday night, but police resources were quickly allocated to quell this. In any event, our planning processes continue, I can assure you of that. There are mutual aid contingencies in place should we require them, although we're hopeful that we won't, but all of the planning and contingency work has been explored, and mutual aid support from other parts of the UK can be called upon if required. So we will continue to deliver on our policing purpose in a very straightforward way, hopefully, of keeping people safe through delivery of policing with the community. So Chair, thank you. I'll hand back to you for questions.
Thank you, Chief Constable, for a very comprehensive report. And as we have quite a number of questions, some requiring probably lengthy answers, we'll move straight to the questions. And I want to start with the Police College question from Roisin.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, George, for that comprehensive report. I want to ask a three-part question, just in following on from the special board meeting that we had on the 29th of June, and which you referred to about the student train at Garnable and the impropriety. And really the three parts of the question are, first of all, what were the immediate changes that you've implemented and introduced to student training? The second, we are expecting a report imminently from yourself on these issues, but do you, as Chief Constable, believe a wider independent review of the police college is necessary? And the third question, which is linked to that, in view of the possibility of a review, do you believe there is a need for a temporary freeze in recruitment until the issues in relation to the police college are reviewed? Thank you.
Well, Alan Todd has been managing a lot of the fallout and the consequences from those incidents that you referred to at the police college and that we have reported to the board comprehensively on. But so Alan will come to some of the detail, but in broad terms, there was a sort of fast time action plan to fix things, and Alan in a moment will outline what those were that have been done to ensure that our question bank has the breadth and depth, is valid and reliable and defensible and all of that. So that work has been done, and I will be in a position to write to the chair of the board early next week, providing reassurance around some of the detail on that, which I'm hoping will reassure board members. There is a need for a wider review that we have developed a terms of reference around, and again we'll share that with the policing board. That review will have an element of independence to it, in that we will bring in a senior practitioner involved in training, in police training from somewhere within these islands. I've yet to identify a person, but they will come in almost as a challenge function or a critical friend. So the team of people who are currently working through this and reporting to Alan will continue to do that, but their work will be quality assured and will be scrutinised by someone who has both the practitioner knowledge and understands the broader strategic issues around delivery of training and examinations and working with universities and so on. So I hope that reassures the board to some extent. Again, Alan will give you some of the detail around that. The third point that you raise around, is there a need to press pause and stall recruitment on the basis of this? We as a team have considered this. We are listening to the board around it. We may well do that. What we would like to do is have this, we've got this fast track action plan that has been sorted within the last number of days and weeks. There's a more medium term, but we would expect that to be capable of reporting probably around mid-September. And we will make a judgment on whether or not there is value and understand the operational consequences, because once we stop recruiting, it has an impact on the number of police officers we can get out there. So that will be a balanced judgment that we need to make. I do recognise that it is my decision to make in terms of the operational running of the organisation, but I also am respectful of the community confidence issues around this and the board view that has been expressed that we should at least consider pressing pause to allow the review to establish its findings, make any recommendations, and indeed have those recommendations embedded before we move to the next phase of appointing people or selecting people into the police college. So not ruling it out, but we need to just balance out the risks that will be involved from stalling recruitment for a short period of time against the benefits of that. But absolutely open to looking at the possibility of that. So Alan, do you want to just give a little bit of detail around what we have done and also maybe flesh out some of that terms of reference that we've been talking about?
Certainly, thank you. The Chief has already referred to what are called the fast track actions, with the immediate steps taken to take some corrective action. So in the first instance, there was a suspension of all the examinations in the college pending a look at the fast track actions. We conducted a further statistical scrutiny of the recent examination scores, pass marks, average scores, performance on a question by question basis, and that was undertaken across a range of examinations to make sure that the impropriety that we had identified in a small number of the squads, that there was no evidence to suggest that was taking place in the run-up to that or previous to that, and we have significant levels of reassurance that wasn't the case. But that is something we continue to do across all the scores and all the exams now taking place in the college. We examined a wide range of allegations and suggestions that were made in the press, media, social media and other channels to identify issues that may require further investigation. We looked at those on a case-by-case basis, and indeed will continue to do so going forward. But it's safe to say at this stage that other than the matters that have been reported to this board, that there's nothing additional to that has come out at this moment in time that would substantiate any of those. But that doesn't mean we're complacent about it and continue to keep an eye on those issues. And indeed, if anybody has issues in relation to that, we're only happy to hear what they have to say in relation to it. We've introduced new questions to expand the bank of examination questions, as the Chief has mentioned. This has been done in the short term by college staff to ensure that the previous practice of some of the questions been duplicated in recent examinations no longer occurs. That will be reinforced. We've undertaken a procurement exercise through the Central Procurement Department to get external assistance in substantially increasing the bank of questions that will significantly increase the variety and span of questions across exams, resets and otherwise, indeed across squads. And that is in place and will be brought in as soon as those questions are ready. We continue to conduct statistical scrutiny of upcoming examinations to examine in the short term that remedial action has been effective, and indeed, having just reinstated exams in the college, the most recent set have returned to failure rates both in the main exam and resets that give us a significant amount of confidence that the scores in those exams are now back to what they were before these issues arose and were reported to the board. That gives us a significant amount of confidence that the steps taken have had the desired effect in the short term, and indeed that our medium-term approach will continue to deliver that going forward. We've also enhanced with student officers the prominence of confidentiality requirements, some of which confusion around which may have been a contributing factor in the facts reported to this board previously, to reinforce on the back of the other conversation of student officers their own responsibilities and the penalties for breaching that. So those immediate changes have been implemented across that. We've now been through one cycle of examinations. We're getting a significant degree of reassurance that those are effective and in place, and we'll continue with the rest of that going forward. You asked on the back of that, and the Chief already touched on whether there's a wider independent review, and the Chief already touched on what that would look like. Just a little bit of detail around the aspects that we see being central to that will be to review and redefine the aims and objectives of student officer training, and define what supporting college culture to deliver effectively against that looks like. And that some of the specifics around that will include the balance between a pass-fail culture within the college and creating a safe learning environment for training and development of what is a highly skilled profession. The balance and relevant importance within the course structure between academic content and practical policing skills. The balance between performance, learning and development, which echoes the previous piece that I talked about. But also in listening to members and feedback from this board, we'll be reviewing the time frame, condensed nature and the associated intensity of the course and the associated consequences of that for the supporting culture, to make sure that those are all mutually supportive. And the framing of context and input by any training staff and other contributors to ensure that that is culturally aligned with the aims and objectives of the course. So trying to wrap our piece around it, making sure that we understand what success looks like and that we have both a practice and a culture that supports the delivery of that in line with the expectations of this board. In addition, we will review the examination structure in line with those wider constructions, specifically the number and frequency of the examinations, the interval between exams and resits, the operation of what is referred to as Regulation 6 process, which is the regulation under which consideration dismissal is considered against student officers. And we'll be looking at to make sure it's holistically balanced assessment of performance across academic and practical policing skills, and there's an effective operation of the appeals process, both of which should be seen to support the desirable culture that we're seeking to create within that. And that will then be wrapped around, as the Chief has alluded to, the appointment of appropriate external critical friends to act as a challenge and guidance function from within subject matter experts to assist us get to where we need to be. And it's my desire that we would have that work well progressed and reporting back to this board in the early part of the autumn.
Thank you. We'll move on to Jennifer McCann, who's a question. Brexit.
Thanks very much for listening so far. You'd be aware, obviously, of there's been a number of major There's been a number of major issues of concern right across the north and indeed across the whole island of Ireland about the implications of the recent vote that resulted on by the north here voted to remain. The vote is about leaving the EU. So I just wanted to know, what discussions you've had both internally and externally regarding the implications of Brexit for policing in general, but more specifically for the PSNI.
Yes, and really the news sinking in and just the impacts are just starting to become clear as well. So consider we are the only part of the UK with a land border, this is obviously very important to us in how we ensure that people on the whole of the island of Ireland are kept safe, and the Brexit vote and the consequential change to treaty arrangements don't in effect make this an easier place for organised crime groups to work. So we're very conscious of that going forward. The NCA, the National Crime Agency, has taken on a specific piece of work which will analyse the impact on all the various EU treaties. And for us, I think there's a number of areas of concern that we would wish to see addressed. One is European arrest warrants. We have used European arrest warrants both to bring offenders back here, but also then to assist other European nations in bringing offenders to justice. And these are pretty commonplace events. Probably on average about 50 a year are either exercised in or out of this jurisdiction. And so it's not an uncommon event for European arrest warrants to be actually actioned in the jurisdiction. But I can give you the exact figures of the last 4 to 5 years in respect of that. Also, joint investigation teams, and you may have seen 2 weeks ago, 2 Hungarian nationals were successfully prosecuted and imprisoned for human trafficking. That was the result of a joint investigation team of both law enforcement authorities in Sweden, where some offences were committed. We picked up a piece here where offences were committed around human trafficking into prostitution, but also with the assistance of law enforcement in Hungary. And joint investigation teams work under the auspices of Eurojust, and that too is part of the EU treaty position. And we've used that for human trafficking, as I've outlined, but also around drug trafficking from the continent as well into Northern Ireland. So all of those are of particular concern. At a sort of deeper part, and not less public, is the work that is done around the exchange of intelligence, and the exchange in particular of intelligence around money laundering or suspicious transactions of money moving through the European banking system, and that's a very important element, obviously, of tackling organised crime. And again, these are areas that will need to be addressed going forward to again ensure that we're not operating as a position where organised crime groups find it easy to operate here. On the island of Ireland, there is an intergovernmental agreement from 2003 which does secure police-to-police cooperation and underpins a lot of our relationships with Garda Síochána, but now law enforcement, as demonstrated by the recent cross-border joint action plan, is about other law enforcement partners as well, and that would need to be secured going forward. So just, and this is just, the initial reading of this without going into the depths of this, because we will be doing that with both the DOJ and also with the NCA. There are many impacts around using these European treaties. I don't think anybody ever envisaged this would happen, and these treaties are built up layer on layer and are intertwined, and it's going to be very complex to build up the law enforcement cooperation, information sharing, and the evidential sharing protocols and treaties that we have now and replicate that going forward. There's a lot of work to do that.
Paul has a supplementary and Nicola.
Yeah, this is a very recent development following Brexit was the increase in hate crime incidents, which resulted in the National Police Chief Constable for a five-fold increase. And just yesterday, Scotland Yard, just figures not quite as high, still a doubling of hate crime incidents. Have you any figures on Northern Ireland in the same period the week after?
Best place to answer that, Paul.
Yes, Paul, I'm pleased to say that we haven't seen the increase that has been seen in Great Britain. I do have the specific figures. So in the week after the referendum, from the 23rd to the 30th of June, there were 31 race hate incidents and crimes reported to us. That's actually a reduction of 34%, or 16 fewer incidents compared to the exact same week in 2015, when there were 47 incidents recorded, and it's also fewer than the previous year, 2014, when 37 incidents were recorded. We are seeing reductions this year in the reporting of hate crime, which we're keeping a very close eye on, because traditionally it has been an under-reported crime. But looking at the 5-year trends, we have seen an increase. But on your specific question about a post-Brexit spike, we are not seeing that in Northern Ireland. We're not complacent. We're well linked into our colleagues in the National Police Chiefs Council. In fact, my colleague Mark Hamilton here is the national lead throughout the United Kingdom for hate crime. So I get good advice every day, but we're keeping a really close eye on it.
Well, thank you. That's
Thank you. It's my understanding that the First and Deputy First Minister, immediately upon the vote on Brexit, requested urgent papers from all government departments about the impact. Was that paper or any input requested from the PSNI?
Yes, we are working with DOJ in terms of submitting what we think are the initial impacts of this, but as I've said, I probably didn't envisage a position where we'd be unpicking, in effect, the impact of losing so many EU treaties, and it's going to take some time to understand all the unintended consequences there is in this.
Sorry, Chair, but has a paper been submitted?
Well, the information has been submitted, but it's for the department then to draw up the criminal justice paper. It's not a separate case paper.
Over to you, Jerry.
Chief Constable, in the wake of the Loughinisland report from the Ombudsman, you came in and gave a very comprehensive report, and during it you recognised and apologised for collusion. But you made a statement a few days later, if it quoted to you, it's if I got to a point where I was convinced in a very clear way that collusion was a key element of the Loughinisland murders, then I'd be looking to take that conclusion into evidence through arrests, interviews and charges. The question was, first of all, there's an inference then that you didn't accept it in the way that you said at that meeting, and indeed in one of the answers that you've sent in written today, you've repeated that. So there is some, could you clarify that? And could I also ask you in terms of that, has the PSNI moved forward in terms of any trying to find evidence around this, or indeed doing any arrests?
I apologise for any confusion, because the position hasn't changed. It's been consistent throughout. First of all, for the shortcomings in the police investigation, I have repeated unequivocally the apology that was first given in 2011 on the first Ombudsman's report, which identified investigative shortcomings. I, at the last board meeting, also made a clear and unequivocal apology for the fact that collusion was found to have occurred between police officers and those who actually pulled the trigger. The police ombudsman used very strong language around him being able to say unambiguously, in his words, that collusion was a key element of those Loughinisland murders, and for that, of course, I apologise. The quote that you have put back to me, Jerry, is a partial quote. I was explaining my surprise at the distance between the strength of the Ombudsman's language, which I respect and I accept, and I apologise to the families for, and his investigative actions. So, if collusion was a key element of those murders and of all the precursor incidents that were talked about and so on, I did find it surprising as an investigator. What I was saying, if I had been investigating this and I came to such a firm, strong conclusion that there was indeed collusion, I would be asking myself, that sounds like conspiracy to murder, that sounds like malfeasance in public office, that sounds like at least a prima facie case that there has been a breach of the law. If I came to that reasonable suspicion, I would be wanting to probably arrest and definitely interview and definitely report to the prosecutor these people who I unambiguously concluded had been a key element of those murders. And all I was doing in that quote, I think there's been some confusion. All I was saying was, the Ombudsman comes to this conclusion. I respect that. It's not to me to question the Office of the Police Ombudsman. He comes to that conclusion. What I was saying was, if I had got to a point where I was convinced in a very clear way that collusion was a key element of the Loughinisland murders, then I'd be looking to take that conclusion into evidence. And what does that mean? Those police officers who colluded with loyalist paramilitaries, according to the Ombudsman, and I accept his finding that, I'm not questioning it, they should be arrested and interviewed and prosecuted. Prosecuted if there is sufficient evidence. I do accept that with the passage of time, there sometimes is a difference between having a reasonable suspicion, which is all you need for arrest and interview, and translating that into a charge or even into a prosecution. So I do understand, and we suffer this frustration ourselves in legacy issues. You feel like you're doing this with one hand tied behind your back at times because of the passage of time and the integrity of evidence and people's memories and witnesses having died and all that sort of stuff. But actually, he's unequivocal here in his view that collusion was a key element in the Loughinisland murders. But yet, as I understand it, nobody was interviewed under caution, nobody was arrested, nobody was formally reported to the Public Prosecution Service. And all I was doing in that statement was simply expressing probably my disappointment that those responsible for these murders by way of collusion were not being held to account in a way that I would have expected the investigative capacity of the Ombudsman's Office to have done.
Right, but may I persist, Chief Constable, in terms of what you said, see, so it's very clear you are accepting the conclusions about collusion within the report. I suppose whatever about the, and I'm not dismissing it because you've made some very strong comments or whatever about the Ombudsman's Office, is that not a duty then on yourself, or PSNI, as the leader of it, to try and pursue those leads or those accusations of collusion, because they are very strong accusations? Does that not fall to you now?
Will you be clear, there's the responsibility
for... If we just finish, of course it isn't just PSNI, there are other members who goes back who are not in PSNI.
Yeah, well, this is where there is the division of responsibility. So the collusion element clearly relates to former RUC officers, but this is only 1994. This is not like long legacy stuff. There's a number of these key players who the Ombudsman has concluded were guilty of collusion, unambiguously colluded, and that collusion was a key element of the Loughinisland murders. It's his responsibility, and I don't have responsibility for it because he has it in law to interview those people, to investigate that criminality by former police officers. I clearly do have a responsibility for anybody that's not a police officer. So there are references to precursor incidents, to arms shipments and all of that. that will involve criminality of both potential criminality of members of paramilitary groups, of terrorist organisations, and, as the Ombudsman has concluded, of police officers. So he investigates the police officers, we'll investigate the other piece, and that's work that we have scoped. I've given it to Mark Hamilton to do in Legacy and Justice Department, and there are people who are currently scoping out of the Police Ombudsman's reports what are the lines of inquiry that we will now need to pursue, how we're going to do that, and where does it, I mean, we've briefed the board on the case sequencing model, this large stack of legacy investigations that we're trying to work through in the absence of the HIU, for example. So, but all of that we're not going to ignore. We're going to take the benefit of the Ombudsman's investigative work, and where he's pointing to issues where we have an investigative locus, then we will take that very seriously, and work's been done to categorise that and to understand what work we need to do. But what I can tell you is that the work that we'll be doing will be knocking doors, arresting people, interviewing people, and reporting to the Public Prosecution Service. And my surprise is that with these police officers who have colluded, they should be held to account. He should be doing what he would expect me to do, and I can't understand why that does not happen.
Thank you. Stephen Fry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on a number of major operational issues that are very current at this stage. Apologies if these are jumping about a little bit, but first of all, I think we all concur about the outstanding success of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland in terms of their performance on the pitch at the Euros, and in particular how well the fans of both teams conducted themselves in France. But could you outline to us the operational or the actual costs incurred in terms of the policing operation in relation to the situation in France?
Yes, well, Maria has led on that for us, so perhaps you can give the detail on that.
Thanks, Chief, and thank you, Stephen. Yes, there were a party of 8 PSNI officers led by Superintendent Goddard, the operations manager for the Operations Support Department, who led the police delegation for Euro 2016. In terms of the costs of that, the travel and accommodation costs are met by the French police and the French government as part of the UEFA arrangement, and the flights to and from Northern Ireland are met by the IFA as part of arrangement of football. So that leaves really minor subsistence issues and some overtime issues to be picked up. There was a budget of that of £40,000. I haven't got the final bill in it. It will be less than that, maybe substantially less than that. And the Deputy Chief Constable was able to fund that from easements within the organisation, so that those costs don't impact on local policing. So it's as a standalone from within service funding. I personally would like to place on record my thanks to those people who actually, whilst some people may think that a number of weeks in France is a very attractive prospect, there was a lot of hard work went in. You have seen that unfortunately for different reasons there were 2 deaths of fans. There were many other incidents where police helped both between the French authorities and the fans, and just indeed with the fans generally. And I know from many late night phone calls from Nigel on the team that work sometimes started very early in the morning, or briefings went on to the very early hours with fans and matches. So a lot of hard work went in, a lot of good effort, but actually a huge amount of confidence generated amongst the fans with the police officer. I think congratulated.
I certainly concur, I'm sure the rest of the board would concur, passing upon our congratulations on a very successful operation. I'm also very pleased to hear about the sharing of the costs between the different bodies. Turning closer to home in terms of the situation around the summer, just run through 3 questions that sort of are all on a similar theme. First of all, can we have an update or a comment in relation to the situation and violence in Carrickfergus over the past number of days, and in particular the extent to which the police are confident that they can either contain the situation or indeed ideally take on those who are involved in what does seem to be a very deeply ingrained situation in that particular community. Secondly, I concur with the optimism around the situation in terms of both parades and protests with respect to the summer so far. But can you maybe give some further comment in terms of your advanced planning in relation to, in particular, next week in that regard? And finally, probably the most difficult of the issues I recognise, could you maybe clarify what is the PSNI's responsibility in relation to bonfires? We're accepting that it's not solely a responsibility of the police, it's something that falls to a number of different government agencies. But in that regard, do you recognise there are challenges to the rule of law, and while there's no easy solutions, that there is nonetheless a sense of impunity felt by a lot of people who are very directly affected by bonfires? Obviously the situation in Cobble Street in East Belfast is probably the most high profile of that type of context at present.
Okay, Stephen, three fairly big questions there. They all fit with Stephen's portfolio and district policing plan, so what would you suggest?
Yeah, I'll try and take them in turn. Your first question related to Castlemara and Carrickfergus, and last weekend, from Friday onwards, significant community tensions emerged within that community. We saw large groups of men within the estate, and it was clear that there were tensions between a sort of broad family grouping within that area and potentially members of South East Antrim UDA. Police responded and were able to contain the situation before it got too out of hand, but it was very, very tense, and there were a number of arrests made. And over the last few days, we've certainly recovered hammers and golf clubs and crossbow, a variety of very dangerous weapons. Unfortunately, the situation still is ongoing each day. We do have a policing operation in place. It is a substantial policing operation involving dozens of police officers on a daily basis. And we are containing the situation by our presence, but it's clear that there are very significant tensions in that community. We have a criminal justice strategy, it's a very positive one. So for example, there were searches and arrests yesterday, and there will be more searches in the coming days. And we're also trying to encourage, through community contacts, through the local district commander and the neighbourhood inspectors, and really anybody with influence, to try and get this issue sorted, get it mediated, get it negotiated, whatever the reasons for the tensions and the problems are. People need to take a step back. So that situation continues, and we're keeping a very close and present eye on it. And if people break the law, we will do our utmost to arrest them, secure evidence, and place them before the court. And I'm sure that's what will happen in relation to some people. In relation to the parade season and our plans, so far this year, as the Chief Constable said in his opening remarks, the parade season's passed off largely very well. We've had some very large parades that in the past have had some tension. Tour of the North, White Rock, Somme commemoration parades passed off very well, and that there is a sense of a reduced tension this year compared to last year. We were all I suppose disappointed that the community resolution to the Twiddale impasse was unsuccessful, but I think it's really positive, the level of engagement that has been going on there, and indeed, even though it was unsuccessful at this point, people have been very mature and very responsible in their words after that, and I would hope that can get revisited in the weeks and months that lie ahead. We have 17 main demonstrations right across Northern Ireland next Tuesday. We have 594 separate parades on Tuesday alone. We have thousands of police officers on duty next Tuesday, specifically for parades. We have over 50 of our public support units. We have our air support unit, we have our dog assets, we have multiple command groups, and we've been planning for this for months now. We're optimistic that it will go well. There obviously will be points of tension, and those will need careful policing, sensitive policing, but we engage very extensively with everybody involved, with the marching orders, with local communities, and we're optimistic that we should have a good parade season, whilst having contingency plans if in the event the tensions materialise or problems occur. So I think we're well placed there, and the Chief again referenced it. We haven't decided to employ mutual aid. I don't think we need that, other than some explosive dogs and those dogs just to help us out. Your last question then related to bonfires. Bonfires are a difficult issue. To some people, they're an important part of their tradition, to their culture, to their legacy. You reference to Shone Street bonfire that has moved a little bit to Bloomfield Walkway this year. But next Monday night there will be hundreds of people around that bonfire attending the bonfire to celebrate that event. So whilst there are undoubted some tensions around, there are many people who support it and want it. We have no specific statutory responsible for the policing of bonfires, but we are very much part of a partnership. So for example, in Belfast, the City Council chair of the Strategic Bonfires Interagency Group, we take part in that under the chairmanship of the council, along with partner agencies, and we do everything we can to try and influence and to ensure that bonfires occur in circumstances that those who want them can enjoy them, but that it's minimum inconvenience on the lives of the community. There are community groups, restorative justice groups, working actively on the ground as well and bringing positive influence. But they are difficult issues. So they often involve, at this stage, they don't involve any breaches of the criminal law where we are engaged at this point. There may be criminal offences at the point where they're burnt if they damage, cause damage. We are certainly recording in advance evidence of the bonfires being created. If there's any materials on them that are inflammatory or racist or inciting to hate, we will do everything we can to investigate that, and we've had success in the past with that in a well publicised case involving a bonfire in Antrim 2 years ago. But what I would say to you is there is no criminal justice answer to bonfires. So you talk about challenge to the rule of law. I think the answer to bonfires lies again in a bottom-up, community-led discussion involving politicians, involving community activists, involving the police, involving the council, and people working in partnership together to try and have these events occur in circumstances that they cause a minimum of inconvenience, but people who want them. There are over 75 bonfires alone in Belfast. This is a widespread activity. But there's no absolute criminal justice, so we do come in for a lot of criticism. We just yesterday it was front page in the Belfast Telegraph and front page in the Irish News. But I would push back on that and say that there are many others who have responsibilities in relation to bonfires, both at the community and political level, as well as us. And it's in partnership and in discussion and in dialogue and in trying to nudge along and create better conditions that we're likely to have the most success, not in heavy-handed policing.
Thank you, Chair. It's in reference to the point around the need for a bottom-up approach, as you said, and about dialogue with a number of key partners. In some instances, not all, in some instances there is a blurred line between community activists and membership of other organisations. So how does that approach by the PSNI in terms of dialogue sit with one of the key recommendations from the recent panel report on paramilitarism, the one that specifically relates to engagement with paramilitaries? How do you see those two approaches sitting side by side?
So that recommendation doesn't just sit with the police, it sits across all public sector bodies. We are on record that we will speak to people who we believe can assist us with keeping people safe. We will speak to people who are constructive in trying to improve the lives of communities, but we speak with a clear policing purpose. If I believe that I need to speak to people who are community activists, who may have influence within communities, I do so for a clear policing purpose. I do so in circumstances that will never ever impinge on my ability or integrity to pursue anyone for any crime at any time. However, people who may have a history within some paramilitary organisations are also active within communities now in trying to promote better living conditions, better employment opportunities, better hope for young people. And they can bring influence to bear around issues like creating interface tensions, issues around bonfires. And I think when you police in a divided society, and you police in a society that's emerging from conflict, sometimes you need to have conversations that are difficult, that are uncomfortable, that may not even happen normally in other jurisdictions. And they are judgment calls, and at times they can be difficult judgment calls. But when we have our clear code of ethics, which guides us, we have clear policing purpose and vision, which guides us around keeping people safe. And within that, then we have to be held to account for any conversations that we have. But Northern Ireland is a funny place. You know, the sort of people that you're talking about, we'll turn up at garden parties, we'll turn up at meetings in Stormont, we'll turn up at meetings in other public sector organisations and city councils. And our job as a police service is to keep people safe, to do what we're mandated to do under Section 32 of the Police Act. And we will talk to people who can constructively help us do that. But we will never, ever be compromised in our ability to arrest people who we suspect of crime.
Do you want to go ahead with one of your other questions, Nicola?
Yes, it's just in respect of the move to the online application for a firearms licence. I'm sure that you're aware, like we are, that there is growing, if not considerable, opposition to it from individual licence holders, but also from some of the key groups in the sector. I just really wanted to ask around the level of consultation with people, and then also, what is the view on the proposals that are coming from the sector and from people who will be affected by this, that there should be a dual application process. I'm also mindful that on the 22nd of February the licence increased from £50 to £98, and so if one of the arguments in favour of moving to online is that it's cost saving, what was the rationale for the increase in the fee?
Thanks, Nicola. There's quite a bit in it, so I'll try and be concise, but please follow up if I've not made anything clear. You're right, the fees increased substantially to £98 recently. Taking all the fee income on an average year, that accounts for an amount to spend, which still requires the Chief Constable to put an extra £1.5 million a year in addition to the fees to make the firearms licensing branch work. That figure doesn't include the background checks, some of which are substantial, which also go behind the scenes. Now, I don't have a number to capture that, but suffice to say that in addition to the fee income which we receive as an organisation, there's £1.5 million plus out of our main grant. That's £1.5 million competing for space with public protection, child sexual exploitation, protecting older people against victims of crime, and all the other key policing functions. So that's the financial context within which firearms licensing is conducted with PSNI. Allied to that, the paper-based system has been creaking in terms of its performance for some time. That has been exacerbated with the voluntary exit scheme, where staff numbers and indeed critically staff knowledge in the firearms licensing field have been impacted by people leaving the organisation as a result of the voluntary exit scheme. So there's a financial pressure, there's a system which is paper-based and not fit for purpose, and there are increasing staff pressures around it. So all of that context leads us to have to look at how we modernise that, because actually the system's poor and going to get worse over time at a time when we're asking for more money on people, and that to me doesn't sound like a successful service for us to offer. So it was against that background that we explored how we might make the system faster, better, and more effective for people, and we looked at an online system. We've made a lot more progress on that than we might have expected. Actually, there were significant system security issues in the way, there were significant IT costs in the way, but we've partnered with Northern Ireland Direct, and actually it's been a fabulous partnership with them, the Department of Justice and my own branch, that has brought us to a point where I actually think we can deliver what was a very user-friendly online process to pick up this piece. It is fair to say that we have, since the beginning of this work, we have been talking to various stakeholder groups, including all the main stakeholder groups, about our intentions. They're unhappy. Whilst they are supportive of the online process, their unhappiness is about it being exclusively online. They want it run as a dual process. I will say to you, as I've said to them, that running a dual process, running a process that is currently broken, in addition to the new one, only makes things worse, not better. Because the same staff who have to make decisions and examine details on the online process can't also be running a paper process, given the context that I've outlined, and that's the stress that we face. The system and the proposal was subject to a full Section 75 screening exercise to identify whether full equality impact assessment would be required or not, and the screening exercise suggested that it didn't. Notwithstanding that, we are putting a huge amount of effort into mitigating the impact on anybody who may be disadvantaged by an exclusively online process. again put this in context, there are somewhere just over 60,000 firearms licence holders in the UK, and a small percentage of them are within Northern Ireland, and there's a small percentage of them actually affected by the IT piece. So it's a small but not unimportant number of people that will be affected by this. But I do need to challenge back the notion that because it's online, because some people aren't IT literate, that is a big issue, because the current paper system is not working perfectly. 1 out of every 8 applications that we get has to be sent back. That's a huge cost in terms of public time, staff and money, and undermines the effectiveness of the overall process. The postage that we spend sending stuff back, and the postage that we have to pay to get improperly addressed stuff into our organisation costs us £30,000 a year alone, just in stamps. And that's not sustainable against some of the context you've heard outlined around this table. So we're in a place where we have a system that doesn't work and is getting worse against increased fees, and we honestly believe that the Northern Ireland Direct PSNI partnership around online is the answer. We have engaged with stakeholders. They're unhappy about the exclusive nature of that. They have asked me to maintain the dual system for 5 years. I see no good reason for supporting a bad system for a long period of time at the expense of transferring to what is a much better system for users. I am, however, considering on the back of representations made, looked at what the handover period might look like and how we support it in the interim. That will probably be a short number of months, certainly within this financial year. I can't countenance the 5-year piece, but I'm trying to be flexible and trying to listen so that I can deliver against some of the very clear pressures we have around us.
We have a couple of more questions, so if you can bear with us. We'll try and make the questions short and the answers short to just try and get through more. So we'll start with you, Paul.
Thank you. This is a governance question, my usual question. It's on the human resources issue, and in particular when you're talking about the increased demand or is needed because of vulnerable people. So I suppose really on the voluntary exit scheme, what was the total cost to the PSNI, and what savings have been realised to pay to the pay budget, and how will the PSNI ensure that those savings are sustained? But I suppose particularly, how will this sort of ensure organisational resilience? Particularly around earlier comments in your report around organisational pressures arising from the voluntary exit scheme.
Well, in terms of the cost of running a voluntary exit scheme, that was money that was ring-fenced and provided by the executive. It wasn't part of the main grant, and there was an overall cost then of £9.6 million for us to run the scheme. That will achieve savings on salaries for police staff per annum of £9.4 million. So it almost pays for itself in 1 year. We also then, as you'll be aware, the voluntary exit scheme was to run over 2 years, finishing on the 31st of March 2017, to assist and manage the impact within the organisation, and trying to remove some of the uncertainty there's well around VES. We truncated that, and the scheme will finish for ourselves on the 30th of September, when the last tranche of VES applicants who've been accepted in the scheme will leave. So overall, 301 staff will have left under the VES process, and that will bring our overall number of police staff to approximately 2,000. Now that is reflected in the medium-term resource plan for this year, and then it will be built in going forward. Now the second part of this is we know exactly where people are going from. We can start to plan around the business going forward. We did, in managing this scheme, look for value for money in terms of those who had applied, and secondly then we also protected operationally very important parts of the organisation where skills are in short supply. So areas like fingerprint experts, and fingerprint expert takes 5 years to train up when going through all their processes. So obviously that was an area that we sought to protect. So going forward, we also then have the priority-based resourcing project process that Chief Constable and I are involved in. And this involves a very in-depth and the innovative look at what goes on in the organisation, all the various functions. And from that already we can see business change, which will release resources into police staff, but also then change perhaps the way we're able to do some of our work and also then prioritise. So as we work through that process, then we will re-engineer the organisation to in effect run on the police staff that we have now, but also then look at workforce mix going forward. So looking critically at all the jobs police officers are doing, for instance, I think maybe done by somebody else. I think it's very important for us to really emphasise how central police staff are to delivering the policing function here in Northern Ireland, what an important group of staff they are within the organisation, and our organisational commitment to them. I think the EES in some ways has been very unsettling for our staff, but we have been at pains to emphasise their importance going forward.
Any questions from you, Nicola? Have you finished? Yes. Well, then that concludes the questions, so thank you all for your time and effort, and we will be having a meeting in August, the first Thursday in August, the 4th of August. So just to let people know. Thank you.